What's your favorite thing about DevOps? We're live from Las Vegas, celebrating 10 years of reInvent. I'm Melissa Paranchero. Learn more about what DevOps is and what it means for you from Emily Freeman, Head of DevOps Product Marketing at AWS, interviewed by Quinn from the Duckbill Group.
Welcome to Opinions My Own. I'm Chief Cloud Economist Quinn of the Duckbill Group. My guest/victim today is Emily Freeman, who is the Head of DevOps Product Marketing at AWS. Emily, thank you for joining me.
Thank you. Is there a staff cloud economist? Like, what's your rank?
We have a principal cloud economist,
Okay.
Tim Banks. He's a treasure
Love
and a
Tim.
joy. We're building out a ladder, not in the literal sense where people wind up like clawing over each other to survive before the water fills it, but something close to that in the corporate HR sense.
Yeah, like a promo ladder.
Exactly,
Yes.
only way more bloodthirsty.
Yes, you just kick them off the ladder.
Almost every service that AWS offers could be said to be aimed at developers, with a couple of exceptions, such as the bill, which is aimed at, in many cases, people with money to pay it. And of course, Amazon Managed Blockchain, which, as far as I can tell, is aimed at absolutely nobody you ever want to have a conversation with. But you're focused on DevOps products and the marketing thereof. What is the distinction?
I think, well, with DevOps, my favorite thing about DevOps is it really does sort of cover the entire development lifecycle.
Well, my favorite part of it is it's not mandatory, but yeah.
Or it's just so obscure that no one actually knows what it means.
It's like SRE. Well, what's SRE? Oh, that means it's like DevOps, except you work at Google.
Yes, exactly it. Other cloud trademark.
Yes.
And so, no, for me, DevOps is really something that tries to reach the entire development lifecycle, and it really takes people across that entire sort of pattern of work and meets their challenges at every stage.
My big challenge when I was coming out of being the grumpy Unix systems administrator, because it's not like there's a second kind of Unix systems administrator. You're suddenly old and grumpy as soon as you touch those systems, and there's no going back.
Curmudgeon-y. Grumpy seems...
Yeah. I was very anti-cloud early on because I saw this idea that, well, the thing I'm good at is basically fixing bad patch cables in the data center, swapping hard drives, and being surly when people ask me to do things. And if cloud comes along and handles those things, what does that mean for me?
Yeah.
It was one of those evolve or die dinosaur moments that I had to confront, and I was in my 20s at the time. So it was a scary thing.
Absolutely. And a lot of sysadmins went through that. Like, I don't want to gloss over it. That was a really harsh career moment for a lot of people.
The more I see this in the ecosystem, people identify themselves by the technology that they're working with very often. And we all are subject to that. If something new comes out, I could spend a lot of time and effort learning it, but it's faster to be dismissive and more than a little insulting about it instead, which explains everything coming out of my mouth. Yeah,
and I would argue that 90% of the time when someone says, oh, well, this product or this thing is better, what they actually mean is I'm more comfortable with it.
Oh, absolutely. I love we're going to decide whether we're going to do a cloud migration, and if so, to what provider. Yeah, those are called justification exercises, because very rarely is there new, exciting information uncovered in those conversations.
That's true. You mentioned something earlier about the bill, FinOps.
Yes.
What are your thoughts?
I think that it's trying to do the same portmanteau of development and operations, and we're going to smash them together and call it DevOps, and then DevSecOps, and then DevQAOps, because it turns out that there are more words to smash together.
Data ops, AI ops, ML ops? You're forgetting a lot.
I wouldn't say I'm forgetting them, Emily. That's very much an intentional choice.
I like to call them the blank ops.
The problem I have with the FinOps movement is that between developers in the application developer sense and between the surly sysadmin/operations staff, of which I was very much one, there always has existed a natural tension in that developers want to ship new features. They want to go ahead and get the code they have written out into the world. And the operations tension has always been, if you change things, it's going to break. So if I say no, I get to go home on time. And if I say yes, we're going to be here till 3 in the morning trying to solve a DNS issue, because it's always DNS.
Yes, and with that, it's not that these people personally have these convictions, it's that systemically we evaluate these roles based on
individually, people are rock stars. They are amazing in this entire space. Collectively, they're terrifying.
Yeah. They wield a lot of power.
Exactly. The collective noun for our developers is, of course, a merge conflict. And it's just a treasure and a joy working with folks. So, we're going to wind up doing microservices, which solves the problem of 5,000 developers working on the same repository, which is awesome. Then you go the other side, and you look at a small startup with 5 people and 500 microservices, and you get the sense someone very much lost the plot somewhere.
Have you seen that GIF where the fishermen are pulling up like a net of fish, and it's I forget who did it, but it was, you know, microservices, and out of the net comes like an elephant seal, because it's one of the services always carries the weight.
I haven't seen it yet, but
It's fantastic.
I think we're all thinking of a particular service, and it's always a different service based upon what has brutalized you in the past in the world of operations. It's the, oh yeah, it's going to be LDAP for me, and someone else is, really? It would have been a database. And everyone has their own opinions about these things and things that hurt.
Well, and it's often, I like it when companies, they'll take the thing that really does most of the heavy lifting in their system, and they kind of cordon
Usually the
it
ops
off.
team.
Yes, all 2 of them. They cordon it off and they call it an engine. And then they put basically like proverbial caution tape around it. It's like, don't touch it. It's fine. It's cold fusion.
The problem that I've always seen, at least a problem I've seen, is that Kubernetes has been talked about a lot, and yes, Kubernetes is inherently a problem. I view it as a solution to a problem that is not particularly sympathetic. Specifically, I want to work at AWS, but your hiring bar is too high, so I'm going to run Kubernetes so I can cosplay working at a cloud provider instead.
It's not the case.
It's like, I'm going to use Kubernetes to go ahead and build my own cloud provider out of popsicle sticks and string at home.
First of all, the internet is only popsicle sticks and string.
Yes, the fact that it works at all is nothing short of amazing.
It truly is. Like, it blows my mind regularly. No, I think Kubernetes is a popular solution for a known problem. Do I think it solves every problem? No. Do I think it has a little bit of this tech word bingo element to it? Yes, absolutely.
I do love the Greek mythology reference. Naming a service after the god of spending money on cloud services was inspired.
I missed him in Mythos. I didn't hear that one.
Yeah, it beats other naming approaches that you folks have taken, like Aurora, a database named strictly after Disney princesses. I mean, that's great.
Where's Ariel? Jasmine.
Yeah. There are several others, but again, we don't know what's coming in the fullness of time.
That's
and
true.
Of course, one should not speculate about product roadmaps in public where people can yell at us.
No, yeah, I've been trained against that.
Exactly. So when you were ramping up at AWS, you had seen it from the outside for a while.
Yes.
What was the biggest surprise?
For me, I think the biggest surprise working at AWS is really just how incredible the employees are and how talented and intelligent they are. It truly is some of the most incredible human beings I've worked with.
It's easy for me to depersonalize and see it as the giant company. And of course, big companies are doing things, but it's people, it's individual people. And I've always been extremely impressed by the folks that I encountered, with 1 or 2 notable exceptions, who absolutely know who they are. Now everyone's wondering whether I mean them.
I like that you...
Maybe.
You have nemesis.
Oh, plural, absolutely. Of course I do.
Yeah.
It's... you learn new things all the time. For example, I was surprised when I started talking to Amazonians in some depth about a variety of different things, about how seriously they, for example, they say, our customers are extremely important to us. Making our customers happy is important. And then I show them my architecture, and then they amend that to making most of our customers happy is important, because you should follow customers only to a certain point before where they have gone, none can follow.
Yeah, well, there's an absurdity, I think, to most of your work, really. And so, no, I think, honestly, AWS is customer obsessed. We talk about it constantly in meetings, and when we're thinking about creating different products or launching different things, it really is, how does this serve the customer?
I have never met anyone as diligent as Amazonians are about making sure that when you're talking about an AWS service, you put the proper AWS or Amazon at the beginning of the service name.
So I'm still nervous about this because I don't know every single one yet. So I treat it like the gendered nouns in other languages that I never fully learned. So I just drop it.
Oh, and if you put either AWS or Amazon in front of Bottle Rocket, people scream, because no, that is an open source project that is not Amazon specific.
There you go. See, you can't do it.
No.
So if you just drop it, you're safe.
Exactly. Just mumble it,
whole
and people
strategy.
hopefully won't notice it. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can we talk about these for a second? What are these? Because I feel like, are you going to hit me with the Gom Jabbar? Like, what is?
I'm wondering that, like, what's in the box? Pain. Oh, it's a managed NAT gateway. Why didn't someone tell me that?
That's what it is. Thank you. Wait, we have to rearrange it so it's nice and fancy.
Oh, of course. Rearranging the managed NAT gateways on the glass table is absolutely a metaphor for something in computing. I hope I never find out what.
It's like little building blocks.
Exactly. Brick by brick, piece by piece. And that is, on some level, the AWS story, where
really
we've
is.
built an awful lot of these tools you can build like Lego and assemble them into something that presumably solves a business problem that you have. And that's awesome.
It is.
The challenge is, it's a double-edged sword, because when a service gets launched, you don't know yet how customers are going to use, or in my case, egregiously misuse, a new service.
Yes.
You learn from your customers.
Yeah.
The counter argument there is, we've built you a whole bunch of bricks. Here you go. You can use them to build a house. What kind of house? And the closest you get is, well, here's a customer who has built a house out of this, but those customers are generally not aligned with exactly what I'm working on. For example, I'm mostly there to be obnoxious on the internet, and they, on the other hand, tend to be, a large bank. And there's a little bit of disconnect between those two use cases, although in some cases, not as much as one would hope.
That's fair. And I think sometimes with the customer cases, it can be really hard with these incredibly large enterprises implementing things that don't always apply to smaller companies or companies in different constraints or industries. But I think you bring up a good point, which is we do have just an incredibly broad portfolio of discrete incredible services. And one of the challenges, I think, for us to meet over the next decade is really not just providing these Legos, but also the instruction set. If I buy a box of Legos for my daughter, we have all the pieces, and I can build whatever I want, theoretically. Like, being able to configure and develop whatever thing I want with a tool set is positive. Like, it's a good thing.
Yeah. Same story here.
Like
my daughters are still young enough that I can basically mislead them and declare victory over monstrosity I've built being effective. It turns out being a thought leader on the internet is remarkably similar. No, it's supposed to do that.
That's true. That's why your daughter has no idea what the actual Millennium Falcon looks like.
Exactly. At this point, it looks kind of like just a bunch of Lambda functions wired together.
And what's wrong with that?
Absolutely nothing.
Thank you.
One of the problems that we see in this entire industry in general, and even restricting it to AWS services on their own, there are now over a dozen different managed database services, and I'm left with the distinct impression that you're not quite done making managed databases. I don't know what the job title is of person that decides which of these database services is appropriate for a given use case. It's like a DBA, only horrible, because I just want to build a website that winds up showing pictures of cats or whatever it is that you happen to be building. But there are so many nuances to all of this. Which one do I pick? It leads almost to analysis paralysis.
Well, and I think that's part of the challenge with any of these categories. We're picking on databases right now, but there are so many different solutions to so many different problems that it becomes a difficult problem. Do you create something that's a blanket solution but does not meet the needs of every single customer, or do you attempt to actually meet the needs of all the customers?
The thing that I don't believe is well understood for folks who have not tried to put on a even small-scale event, like picture a dinner party for 8 people. There's a lot of planning and work and logistics that go on long before people show up, unless you throw terrible dinner parties.
That's fair.
I cannot quite get to the idea of figuring out how much work and planning goes into putting on an event like this, but it has to be absolutely massive.
Oh, it's an incredible. I mean, I always think of it like the Golden Gate Bridge. They'll repaint the Golden Gate Bridge, and then as soon as they finish, they turn around and restart again. And that's a bit like reInvent, I think. I'm not involved in a lot of the details, but I know just how hard that group of people are working to put on such an incredible event, and it's a lot of work.
So I saw a talk you gave somewhat recently talking about AI ops, a term I despise for a variety of excellent reasons.
I did too.
And I've never gone for the whole marketing story around machine learning because it comes from cloud providers where, well, what do we know about machine learning? Well, we know that you can theoretically use it to do anything on huge quantities of data and extract anything at all from that data with the singular exception of a workable business model. So the companies that are pushing this inherently tend to be companies like yours that make money from storing all of that data and powering the compute that does these machine learning projects. And so I had a very cynical idea of, okay, you're basically selling pickaxes into a gold rush, and it makes sense. One of the things that has started to shift that opinion, and I say this sincerely, was your talk on this.
Thank you.
And part of it was about the idea of DevOps guru. And you talked about how, is this a silver bullet? Absolutely not. But here's what it does, here's how it can help, and here's where we see it going. And it was so wildly refreshing to see someone talking about this stuff in a way that aligned it with real problems, admitted that the magic computer box that you pay for by the hour and 17 other dimensions isn't going to do it all for you. It was, okay, this is someone being honest and authentic and sincere about it. Now I can pay attention because it doesn't feel like you're trying to sell me on anything other than an idea of incremental progress toward a grander vision. That was amazing.
Thank you. And that's absolutely my entire approach to my work. I like to think that I've built up some industry trust and an authority, and I want to make sure to honor that. And, you know, I believe in just naming the challenges, because it's an honest assessment of the situation. Do I think machine learning and artificial intelligence are going to go further? Absolutely. Do I think that they will solve problems for us that we can't even comprehend right now? Definitely. Are we there? No. We're just starting. But the thing that excites me as far as AWS, we are making investments in that. We're not only, in this case, meeting developers where they're at, but in my opinion, taking them to where they're going.
On some level, it's nice of you to do that. One of these days, you'll even provide the handbasket for them to get there.
Yes, like E.T.
You wrote DevOps for Dummies, which is just, first, it is a spectacular book. My favorite part is the page that my name is on, thanking me for contributing. I don't know what the hell I contributed other than counterexamples of what never to do.
Emotional support as I was wallowing on the carpet.
Exactly. But I love that. My second favorite part of it was the title because it was a magnificent subtweet, presumably of a bunch of people. Who were those people and what team do they work on?
Oh, well, I thought you knew.
Oh, there we are. If you have to ask, it's you. It's like who's the sucker at the poker table? Same story. Who's the dummy in the DevOps space? Ah.
Looking at him.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, and in all seriousness, I think, you know, I liked the Dummies brand, one, because it is somewhat iconic. But I also think it was such an exercise for me in taking these technical, difficult concepts and boiling them down to where anyone could read them. You know, I think when I was writing it, it was such an exercise because my editor would come back, like a server. I wrote a sentence essentially, like spin up a server. And she was like, well, what does that mean? I was like, turn it on?
Yeah.
Like, but it really is an intellectual exercise. And I like to joke about a different kind of IaaS. I call it idiot as a service. And I believe asking the sort of silly questions or simply defining some of these technical terms really evens the playing field for any kind of interaction. You know, I am passionate about communications and that sort of intersection between humans and tech. And being able to come to the same approach or definition of a term, I mean, that'll take you 50% of the way there. You know, you can really
Ask
miss
three
each
people
other.
what DevOps means, get 5 answers.
5,000 answers. I mean, it's
yes.
endless what it means to different
Depends.
people.
You asking me to do work right now? Because it's
Well,
going to change my answer. Yeah.
Exactly. You going to pay me more? Definitely. I do the DevOps.
There's a clear progression of how customers interact with AWS services. At the base level, they click around in the console and build things by hand. The next level up is they use CloudFormation or Terraform or something like it. The next level beyond that we're seeing emerge is the CDK or Pulumi or things of that nature. And the ultimate expression, what everyone finally ascends to, is using the console and then lying about it. When I explore a brand new service, I start with the console. And the reason behind that is it shows me from a storytelling, narrative, marketing perspective that this is how you envision people interacting with this service. And sometimes, I've got to be clear, you are not aligned as a company with
Yes.
what individual customers do, either due to different perspectives, different use cases, different needs, and that's fine.
Yeah. It's sort of the joy of producing a product, I think, because you don't actually know how people are going to absorb it or apply it. And this, I mean, even if you're creating a to-do list application, you're going to get really interesting cases of people using it in a way you couldn't have ever imagined.
It's a fun question to ask people at random at some point. Like, cool, I'm going to go ahead and apply a policy right now. And you are no longer allowed, anyone in your company, to log into the console. You have to do everything via API changes. And some people say, oh, that'll be fine. And other people panic. And only one of those two people is being honest with themselves.
Yes.
There's always those little edge case things where something is configured by hand somewhere. And it's in some cases called technical debt. In other places it's called legacy, which is of course condescending engineering speak for it makes money. And yeah, things are like they are for a reason. It's easy to make fun of any architecture out there. But things are the way they are for a reason. And people have built things with the best of intentions in mind. It's remembering the human while you're dealing with the technology, in some respects, seems like it is both a nearly forgotten art and, from my perspective at least, part of the heart and soul of DevOps.
Absolutely. And I mean, you know, you mentioned APIs, and it got me thinking, this is where any kind of API design or documentation is really critical, right? Even if there are things that you have to go into the console to actually do, for the vast majority of work, you should have a really smooth, clear, intuitive way of people interacting with a service, I think. And I think API design is something that we somewhat overlook often, but it's really, really important because the API is a contract, really. You're promising that it may build out, but you're not going to go back. And so when you really have to think about something, it forces you to consider some of the different ways and various approaches to a product.
One area that AWS has branched out into somewhat recently is the fault injection simulator.
Yes.
And the idea being that you can intentionally degrade certain aspects of the cloud environment, and it charges money to do this, which I think is a little bit of a competitive misstep, given that a lot of your competitors degrade my experience for absolutely free. How do you feel about that?
Well, I mean, if they're providing that service. No, I think, a fault injection simulator or, any type of that chaos engineering approach to things is really novel, and it's interesting, and I think it highlights a lot of the weaker points of a system. Right? And so you can, that is really the technical approach where you are degrading a service and you're seeing where those thresholds are. And, we talk about SRE, you have those SLOs, SLIs, service level objectives, service level indicators. And those are sort of your clues as to how the system is actually doing. It's your telemetry, observability, to have some kind of confidence in how durable and accurate your system actually is.
Yeah, it feels on some level like you need a certain level of operational maturity to even begin encountering that. Because otherwise it's, well, what happens if your primary database goes away? The answer is, well, I'd better update my resume because I'm in a whole mess of trouble.
Yes. Or I love, this is one of those things where a chart is unhelpful because you're really looking at the difference between 99.995 and 99.5, and it's you're really shaving off some things. So it's not these huge growth opportunities. Your system should work most of the time, and then you can kind of get into these more finite nudges.
So, to be clear, you work at AWS. I very clearly do not, because of hiring standards and a whole bunch of other reasons that all distill down to my personality. But now, I think that we're directly aligned on a particular point, which is you hear periodically a number of folks talking about, we're going to deploy this workload across multiple cloud providers simultaneously for durability. And I have to ask, what do you think they're putting in the enterprise water cooler?
I don't think anything. I think this is actually a concern for folks, and you see this. This is not something that any sort of cloud provider is going to really kind of push. It's a concern about how do I make sure that my system's going to operate in the best possible way going forward. I think that's every CTOs or even CEOs.
I agree wholeheartedly. The counterpoint is that when I was working in the bad old days of data centers, and you had the idea of a phantom router, where you have a router that is active and a router that's in standby, and there's a heartbeat between them to make sure that if one goes down and breaks, the other one steps in and works. The thing that caused the most outage was that heartbeat. So they would wind up keep trying to steal it from each other and take the whole stack down. Similarly, when you start trying to deploy a workload to multiple cloud providers simultaneously, you have to take tremendous amounts of care to make sure that you're not introducing degradation modes rather than solving for them. I always advise people to start off with, okay, AWS has made a lot of interesting decisions, and aspects of this one can be annoying to work with, but I wouldn't change it for a heartbeat. I wouldn't change it for a moment.
Yeah.
Just because there is the idea of that thing, and that thing that I wouldn't change it for a moment, and that is the region separation. So great, ignore multiple providers. Go make this workload active between multiple regions, and see if that works, because we don't see global degradation of services at AWS. Believe me, I've been looking for a long time. It doesn't happen. Global rolling outage isn't a thing that happens. Knock on wood. But yeah, now that I've said it, of course, it's going to happen. No, computers fail. That's what they do in the fullness of time.
But the resiliency and reliability is fantastic.
Pick a provider. I don't care which one. You probably care which one. But pick a provider and go all in until you have a significant reason to change. And when I first started talking about this, it was treated like heresy in some areas. I don't fully understand that, but it seems that a growing portion of the market is starting to come around to my point of view.
Tell me more, which is, like, what was the heresy?
The heresy of, going all in on one provider, then they're going to smack you around and treat you terribly, and it's going to doom and gloom and the rest. But it turns out an awful lot of the people who were predicting that were companies that were trying to sell things that make it easier to go between multiple providers, or at least claim to. And it's... yeah, it feels like you might not be a completely objective party to this. I consider myself reasonably objective in this area because I'm not an AWS partner. I don't work for you. Surprise. It does not matter to me where a given customer places a given workload, but I'd prefer it not break in the middle of the night and make people's day worse.
It's so true. Yeah, no, I think, it's definitely not heresy, and I think you make a good point, which is, with everything in tech, it's sort of this, it depends, right? If you have a problem or a challenge, you have to think about, like, okay, well, if you're thinking this is the solution, why? What are the pros of this? What are the cons of this? What are the costs of this? And so they have to sort of consider all those pieces as they approach their, architecture and infrastructure.
Emily, thank you so much for suffering my slings and arrows and tolerating my crappy excuse for a personality. It's really appreciated.
You're more charming than you know.
I do my best. No one knows their own reputation, and in my case, that is purely for self-preservation.
Good.
I'm Chief Cloud Economist Corey Quinn of the Duckbill Group. My guest has been Emily Freeman, Head of DevOps Product Marketing at AWS, and this is Opinions My Own. Thanks for watching.
Now you know. Or, as they say, the more you know. I'm Melissa Parent-Cheryl. You're watching Live from reInvent.